There is a specific moment in meetings that I find really difficult. The conversation is moving fast, people are talking over each other, and I have something important to add. I can feel the moment is right there, but every time I try to come in, I either wait too long and the point passes, or I start speaking and someone else just keeps going and I sort of fade out.
And what usually happens after that?
I either say nothing for the rest of that section of the meeting, or I bring up my point later when it no longer feels relevant. And each time that happens, I feel a little bit smaller in that room.
That is one of the most common experiences international professionals share with me, especially in English speaking workplaces where the pace is fast and interrupting feels impolite. But here's the thing, in most professional meetings, you're not expected to wait for perfect silence. You're expected to find the right moment and take it with confidence.
Welcome to Career English Lab, where we help international professionals communicate more clearly, more confidently, and more professionally at work. Today, we're looking at how to interrupt professionally, add your point clearly, and make sure your voice is actually heard in meetings. I'm Maya.
And I'm Leo.
Hello, everyone. And this one really feels personal because I've lost so many good contributions simply because I did not know how to enter the conversation at the right moment.
Before we get into the practical tools, I want to spend a moment on something that doesn't get talked about enough, which is why this is so hard in the first place. Leo, you said this felt personal. I think for many international professionals, this is not just about finding the right English phrase. There are real psychological and cultural layers underneath it.
Absolutely. I grew up in a culture where interrupting someone mid sentence was considered genuinely disrespectful. It meant you were not listening. It meant you thought your words mattered more than theirs. And that's a hard belief to unlearn, especially when the stakes feel high at work.
And when you add the pressure of speaking in a second language, you also have what many professionals describe as a kind of imposter syndrome. This internal voice that says, if I speak up and I get the grammar wrong or I phrase it awkwardly, people will doubt whether I belong here. Though you stay quiet to protect yourself.
And the silence feels safer in the moment, even though it costs you in the long run.
It does. And I had a version of this early in my career. I was in a strategy meeting with a senior team, and I could see a gap in the plan that no one else had mentioned. I had the point ready, but I kept waiting for a natural pause that never really came. By the time I decided to speak, someone else had moved the conversation into a completely different area, and I spent the next hour wondering whether I should have just said something.
That's such a familiar experience, and I think what makes it worse is that afterwards you replay it and think, the idea was good, the English was fine, so what stopped me?
Usually, it's a combination of culture and permission. Researchers talk about the difference between what they call high context cultures, where meaning is built gradually and indirectly, and low context cultures, where communication tends to be more direct and faster, and where speaking up quickly is seen as participation rather than aggression. Most English speaking corporate environments lean towards the low context end of that scale.
Which means staying quiet and waiting for the perfect moment can actually read as disengagement to the people around you, even when internally you're very engaged.
Exactly. Understanding that cultural gap is often the first thing that helps people give themselves permission to speak up. You're not being rude, you're doing your job.
So, with that in mind, what does professional interruption actually sound like in English?
The most effective technique is what I call an entry phrase. It is a short, clear signal that you have something to contribute. And I want to split these into three types because each one works slightly differently.
The first type is collaborative. These connect your point to what was just said. For example, to build on what David mentioned, or following on from that. These are smooth and non confrontational. They work well when the conversation is flowing and you want to add without disrupting. What is the second type?
Course correction phrases. These are for when you need to flag something before the group moves on. Before we move on, I want to raise something quickly, or I want to flag a concern about that point. These create urgency without sounding aggressive.
I really like before we move on because it signals that this is time sensitive. It almost asks the group to pause without demanding it.
Exactly. And the third type is question-based. If you're not sure whether you should interrupt, a question gives you a lower stakes entry. Could I ask a quick question on that? Or can I add something here before we go further? These are especially useful early in a meeting or in a group you don't know well.
I think having three types is really useful because it means you're not using the same phrase every time. You can read the situation and choose accordingly.
That's exactly right. And the more you practice, the more automatic that reading becomes. You stop thinking about which phrase to use and you just reach for the one that fits. That's where the real confidence comes from.
What about virtual meetings? Because I find it even harder on Zoom or Teams. The slight audio delay, the fact that you can't make eye contact, the way people sometimes talk over each other without realizing it.
Virtual meetings deserve their own section because the challenges are genuinely different. In a physical room, you can lean forward, make eye contact, or even raise your hand slightly to signal you want to speak. Online, you lose most of those tools.
So your voice has to do all of that work.
Right, which is why I recommend being slightly more direct in virtual settings than you would be in person. A calm, clear, "I'd like to add something here," is usually enough to create a pause, even if you have to say it with a little more intention than feels comfortable at first.
What about the practical features, like the raise hand button?
Use it proactively. Don't wait until someone asks you a direct question. If you have a point you want to make, raise your hand before the current speaker finishes. It gives the meeting host or the group a visual cue that you're ready to contribute.
And the chat?
The chat is underused as a speaking tool. If the conversation is moving too fast to interrupt verbally, write your point in the chat. Quick thought on the timeline when there's a moment. This books your spot. People will circle back to you.
That's clever because it also shows you're engaged and ready even before you speak.
And if you get cut off mid-sentence due to lag or someone talking over you, the recovery phrase is simple. "Sorry, I think I got cut off. I just wanted to finish the point about X." Clean, professional, and most people will immediately give you the floor.
I think a lot of people just go quiet after they get cut off and never come back. The recovery phrase removes that awkward moment entirely.
Exactly. The cutoff isn't the problem. Disappearing after it is.
Can we do a role play here? I think people find it really useful to hear the difference between weak and strong version.
Let's do two scenarios. The first is a clean entry. The second is what happens when someone doesn't stop and how to handle it with gentle persistence. I'll play a colleague making a proposal.
So, as I was saying, I think we should move forward with the current budget allocation and sign off on the vendor this week. We are already behind schedule. Weak version first. Yeah, sorry, I was gonna say something. I think maybe there is a thing about the vendor we should probably check first, maybe.
And the stronger version?
Before we move on, I want to flag something quickly. I'm not sure the vendor has submitted their updated terms yet. It might be worth confirming that before we sign off.
Clear, relevant, and it arrives with purpose. Now the second scenario. I will keep talking even after you try to come in.
Okay,
Right, so for the campaign timeline, I think we push through. The vendor is close enough. Legal has seen the draft, and honestly, I think we just need to commit and move.
first attempt. If I could
Add something there. And the longer we wait, the more we risk the window closing, so I say we confirm by end of today.
second, firmer attempt. Just to pause for a moment. I have an important point on the legal draft that I think we need to hear before we confirm.
And at that point, anyone running the medium professionally will yield.
What I notice is that the second attempt uses her name and names the topic. Both of those together are hard to talk over.
Naming the person and naming the topic is one of the most effective ways to create a natural stop. It's not rude. It signals that what you're about to say is specific and relevant, not just a general comment.
And I think the key with gentle persistence is the word gentle. You're not raising your voice, you're not becoming confrontational, you're simply being clear that you have something worth hearing.
Exactly. Most professionals respond to that kind of quiet confidence. It's harder to ignore than volume.
Now that we have the tools, let's talk about three common traps that weaken your presence even when you're using the right phrases. Trap 1.
Be over apology. People say, "I'm so sorry to interrupt. I know this might not be the right moment, but I just wanted to maybe say something if that's okay." By the time you finish the apology, people have forgotten there was a point coming. You've undermined yourself before you've said anything. Compare that with, before we move on, I want to flag something. Same intention, completely different impression.
I recognize that one. It comes from a genuine place of politeness, but it reads as uncertainty, not respect.
Trap 2, the hesitant opener. Starting with, well, I was kind of thinking, before you get to the actual point. In a fast-moving meeting, people start mentally moving on before you arrive. Start with the entry phrase, then your point, in that order. Do not warm up in public.
And trap 3?
Mismatched urgency. Using a strong, urgent phrase for a minor comment makes you sound like you're overreacting. Using a soft phrase for a critical issue means your point gets treated as optional. Match the phrase to the weight of what you're saying. A major concern deserves, I want to flag something important before we move on. A quick thought can be, to build on that. The language always reflects the stakes.
That's a subtle point, but it makes a real difference to how people receive your message. The phrase sets the expectation before your idea even arrives.
Exactly. Think of it as signaling before you turn. The right signal at the right moment keeps everyone safe and moving in the same direction.
One more thing before we recap. After you've made your point, how do you close it cleanly without just trailing off?
A short handoff phrase. After your point, say, does that make sense to the group? Or, happy to explain further if useful. This closes your contribution with intention and invites engagement without demanding it. It signals that you're done, clearly, and that the conversation can continue.
It also shows confidence because you are not just dropping a comment and retreating, you are staying present and open to dialogue.
And there is one more reason this matters. When you close cleanly, people are more likely to remember what you said. A contribution that fades away at the end tends to fade in memory too. A contribution that ends with a clear signal stays in the room.
Let's recap what we covered today. First, understand that speaking up in meetings often feels hard for cultural and psychological reasons, and naming that honestly is step one towards changing it.
Second, use entry phrases matched to the situation. Collaborative phrases to build on ideas, course correction phrases when something needs flagging, and question-based phrases when you need a softer entry.
Third, in virtual meetings, use your voice with more intention, the raise hand feature proactively, and the chat to book your place in the conversation.
Fourth, if someone talks over you, use gentle persistence. Name the person, name the topic, and stay calm.
Fifth, avoid the 3 traps: over-apologizing, hesitant openers, and mismatched urgency.
And always close your contribution with a clear handoff phrase so people know you're done and ready to listen.
This week's lab challenge: use one entry phrase in a real meeting this week and tell us in the comments what happened. Even one small experiment starts to build a habit.
Subscribe to Career English Lab, and if this helped you, share it with one colleague who works in English every day.
I'm Leo.
And I'm Maya.
See you in the lab.